Hidden beneath Team Cherry's masterpiece lies a network of narrative threads so intricate that most players will never glimpse their full scope. And today, we're unraveling every last one of them. So smash that like button, subscribe if you're not already part of the family, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching this from, because I love seeing how far this community reaches. The Pale King's true experiments. The White Palace wasn't just a monument to the Pale King's ego, but served as an active laboratory where he tested soul manipulation techniques on his own servants. And the evidence sits right there, in the workshop areas most players sprint past while dodging saw blades. The King's molds and Wings molds weren't his only artificial creations, because deep in the palace code and environmental details, we find suggestions he was crafting prototype vessels long before the Abyss experiments began using soul-infused white material that proved too unstable. Those mysterious white fragments scattered through the palace aren't decorative, but failed early attempts at creating life from soul and pale ore combined. The Pale King's workshop contains tools sized for manipulating extremely small objects, hinting he worked at a microscopic level to understand soul itself. His research notes, if you piece together environmental storytelling, suggest he discovered that soul and void weren't opposites, but different states of the same fundamental force. The buzzsaws throughout the palace weren't traps, but discarded cutting equipment from his experiments that got repurposed when the palace collapsed into the dream realm. Every single white structure in Hallownest, from the palace to the spires above the city, contains trace amounts of soul energy, suggesting he literally built his kingdom from concentrated life force. The Pale King's throne room sits positioned directly above the Abyss, not for symbolic reasons, but because he needed proximity to the void for his experiments to work. Those collector's maps showing ley lines of soul energy all converge at the palace workshop, meaning he built his base of operations at Hallownest's most powerful soul convergence point, Deepnest's ancient civilization. Before Hallownest existed, Deepnest housed a sophisticated civilization of weavers and spiders who developed their own form of magic through silk manipulation rather than soul arts. The beast's den wasn't always a feral hunting ground, but served as a temple complex where the spider tribes worshipped an entity they called the Weaver of Fates, whose identity remains deliberately obscured by Team Cherry. Midwife's dialogue contains archaic speech patterns that don't match any other Hallownest resident, suggesting she's speaking a proto-language that predates the Pale King's arrival by centuries. The mechanical aspects of Deepnest's construction, like the tram system, weren't built by the bugs living there, but represent an even older civilization that the spiders moved into after its mysterious collapse. Those strange geometric patterns on Deepnest's walls aren't decorative, but form a written language that no one in current Hallownest can read, except possibly Hera, who never shares what they say. The distant village specifically served as a diplomatic zone where Deepnest tribes met with surface kingdoms, before Hallownest absorbed everything. Nosk's abilities to perfectly mimic other bugs suggests the spiders of Deepnest developed shape-shifting magic that this creature represents a corrupted version of. The spider tribe's departure to the outskirts wasn't voluntary, but represented a forced exile after theological disagreements with Hera's political decisions. Those cocoons everywhere aren't all victims, but many contain sleeping weavers in magical stasis, waiting for a signal to awaken that never came. Hera's title as Beast doesn't mean savage, but represented a sacred role in Old Deepnest culture, roughly translating to she who commands the wild. The infection affected Deepnest differently than other regions because the spider's silk-based magic provided partial resistance that kept the area semi-functional longer. The Moth tribe's betrayal. The Radiance wasn't always hostile to the bugs of Hallownest, but became vengeful specifically after her own worshippers. The Moth tribe abandoned her for the Pale King's promise of higher consciousness. The seer's dialogue reveals moths didn't just forget the Radiance, but actively worked to erase her from history, writing new myths that positioned the Pale King as the original deity of light. Those dream moths scattered through the world aren't random spawns, but represent the ghosts of moths who died trying to resist the cultural conversion and remained loyal to the Radiance. The dream nail itself was originally a sacred relic of Radiance worship that the Pale King repurposed into a tool for his own kingdom's use, adding insult to injury. Crystallized dreams, found throughout Hallownest, weren't natural formations, but represent locations where moths performed their old rituals and the psychic residue crystallized after being abandoned. The seer's regret isn't just general sadness, but specific guilt, because ancient tablets suggest she personally led the faction that convinced the tribe to abandon the Radiance. Moths originally could manipulate dreams as easily as the Radiance herself, but this ability atrophied over generations of not using it after the tribe's conversion. The teacher's archives in the resting grounds contain banned texts that describe the original moth civilization's dream magic techniques. Marmu's unusually strong spirit suggests she was descended from a powerful moth priest bloodline, even though she herself lived in the Pale King's era. The whole reason the moth tribe possessed the dream nail in the first place was to serve as interpreters between the waking world and the Radiance's dream realm. Those strange symbols in the resting grounds that look like maps aren't navigation tools, but star charts the moths used to track the Radiance's position in the collective unconscious. Hera's hidden agenda. Hera didn't agree to become a dreamer out of loyalty to Hallownest, but negotiated a secret deal that would ensure Deepnest could eventually break free from the Pale King's kingdom. The child she demanded as payment wasn't just about having an heir, but represented an insurance policy, because a half-pale being would possess leverage over both kingdoms. Hornet's unusual abilities stem from being literally half-void, even though this seems impossible given Hera's biology, and the truth involves spider silk's unique property to bind contradictory magical essences. Hera's beast form visible in the dreamer memories wasn't her true appearance, but a ceremonial transformation she underwent specifically for the binding ritual. The den where Hera sleeps sits positioned, not randomly, but at the precise center of geometric coordinates that let her dreaming mind maintain control over Deepnest's spider population. Those masked spiders guarding her aren't infected, but following programmed instructions Hera left before sleeping, because she knew she'd need autonomous defenders. The tram pass that conveniently sits in Deepnest wasn't forgotten there, but Hera deliberately placed it, knowing that whoever came to break the seals would need transit access to reach the other dreamers. Midwife's cryptic warnings about Hera's dreams aren't concern for the dreamer, but hints that Hera is still conscious inside the dream and planning something. The beast's den contains hidden chambers, accessible only through complex wall-breaking sequences that house Hera's contingency plans written in old Deepnest script. Hornet's name wasn't chosen randomly, but represents a Deepnest title that means the inheritor who stings, marking her as destined to enact revenge. Hera knew the seals would eventually break and designed her part of the binding specifically to fail first, giving Deepnest's creatures time to escape before the infection consumed everything. Lurian's obsessive documentation. Lurian the Watcher earned his title not just from his physical elevation, but from an obsessive documentation project to record every single event in Hallownest's history. His spire contains hidden archives accessible only through dream nail sequences that house millions of observation reports written in microscopic text. The telescope in his spire wasn't for astronomy, but equipped with custom lenses that let him observe soul energy flows throughout the kingdom, making him Hallownest's chief surveillance officer. Lurian's butler wasn't just a servant, but served as his field agent who would travel to locations Lurian couldn't directly observe and report back details. Those blank tablets scattered through the city aren't incomplete but contain information written in a cipher only Lurian understood, ensuring his records remained private. The Hay Watcher Knights weren't standard palace guards, but represent Lurian's personal failsafe, programmed to eliminate anyone who learned too much about his documentation project. Lurian's loyalty to the Pale King bordered on fanatical, specifically because the king once saved his life from a soul sanctum experiment gone wrong. The spire's location overlooking the city wasn't chosen for symbolic reasons, but because that exact position provided sightlines to every major soul convergence point in Hallownest. Lurian's mask wasn't decorative, but contained enchantments that let him see soul energy invisible to normal bugs. His title as a Watcher extended beyond physical observation, because he also monitored the Dream Realm filing reports about nightmare manifestations and shade activity. The reason Lurian agreed to become a dreamer wasn't duty but opportunity, because being locked in an eternal dream meant he could continue watching Hallownest forever through the Dream Realm. Those hidden reports in his spire reveal he knew about the vessel plan's flaws years before the sealing and documented everything, but never spoke up because he trusted the Pale King absolutely. The Collector's true purpose. The Collector wasn't originally a servant of the Pale King, but represents something far older that got bound into service through a contract whose terms remain hidden in void symbolism. Its childlike behaviour isn't madness, but represents literal truth, because the Collector is somehow frozen at a juvenile stage of development for its species. Those grubs it obsessively protects aren't random victims, but each one contains a fragment of ancient knowledge that the Collector is preserving by keeping them in stasis. The Tower of Love, where the Collector resides, wasn't built by the Pale King, but represents ruins of the previous civilization that the palace was constructed over. Those strange platforms and architecture in the Collector's arena don't match any other Hallownest aesthetic, because they predate the kingdom by thousands of years. The Collector's ability to create void tendrils, despite not being a vessel, suggests void manipulation was more widespread in ancient times. Its collection obsession stems from a magical compulsion placed on it by whoever created it, originally tasking it with preserving living samples of every species. The grubs themselves aren't native to Hallownest, but were brought from outside the kingdom, explaining why Grubfather's transformation is so alien and horrifying. Those hidden maps in the Tower of Love show locations beyond Hallownest's borders, marking places the Collector travelled to gather specimens. The Collector's dialogue about colours and beauties isn't aesthetic appreciation, but describes a spectrum of soul energy that only it can perceive. Its immunity to the infection stems from being literally incapable of dreaming, because its consciousness operates on a different layer of reality. The reason it serves the Pale King involves a binding contract written in void that trapped it in the tower until it completes an impossible collection task. Those void stains throughout its arena aren't decay, but represent failed attempts by the Collector to break free of its magical binding. Soul Sanctum's darkest experiments. The Soulmaster's research went far beyond simple soul manipulation and touched on dimensional boundaries, suggesting he discovered ways to pull energy from parallel realities. Those twisted researchers shambling through the sanctum aren't failed experiments, but successful ones, because their new forms can exist partially outside normal space. The soul totems throughout the sanctum aren't batteries but anchors, keeping rifts to a void-adjacent dimension stable enough to harvest. Soulmaster's claim about achieving immortality wasn't delusion, but truth, because his consciousness now exists, spread across multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Those mysterious geometric shapes floating in the sanctum's basement aren't decoration, but represent higher dimensional mathematics, visualized in three-dimensional space. The research notes scattered through the area reveal the sanctum scholars discovered that soul could be converted directly into void energy through a specific ritual. Soul Master's obsession with achieving a pure focus wasn't about concentration, but represented his attempt to collapse his consciousness into a singular point that could pierce dimensional barriers. The reason the sanctum sits positioned directly above the ancient basin isn't coincidence, but necessity, because that location marks a thin point between dimensions. Those glass tubes everywhere aren't holding specimens, but contain crystallized moments of time that the researchers pulled from alternate timelines. The infection actually made the Soul Master's research more successful by lowering the mental barriers that prevented him from perceiving higher dimensions. His transformed state after being infected wasn't degradation, but ascension to a form that exists partially outside normal reality. The sanctum's strange architecture, with impossible angles and perspective tricks, isn't artistic choice, but represents three-dimensional space-warping under the influence of their experiments. Those soul warriors wandering the halls aren't guarding anything, but trapped in temporal loops, where they experience the same moments infinitely. The elegant key that opens the door wasn't created by the sanctum, but represents an artifact they discovered that could unlock dimensional barriers and then copied. The Grimm Troop's Eternal Circuit. The Grimm Troop doesn't just travel between kingdoms, but literally moves through different dimensions, with Hallownest being merely one stop on an infinite tour through parallel realities. The nightmare realm they emerge from isn't a place, but a state of being that exists in the cracks between dimensions, where rejected dreams congeal into semi-solid form. Grimm's true form isn't the bat creature we fight, but represents a distributed consciousness spread across thousands of manifestations in different dimensions simultaneously. The ritual isn't about rebirth, but represents a necessary cycling of nightmare energy that prevents it from building up to reality-destroying levels. Divine's consumption of charms isn't destruction, but translation, because she converts physical objects into their platonic ideal forms that exist independent of matter. Brum's rebellion against the ritual stems from memories bleeding through from parallel cycles where he made different choices. The nightmare flames aren't actually hot, but represent concentrated anxiety and fear given enough substance to burn. Those Grimkin hunting essence throughout the ritual aren't collecting energy, but redistributing it to maintain cosmic balance. The accordion player in the troupe doesn't just make music, but plays frequencies that thin the barriers between dimensions, allowing the troupe's movement. Grimm's relationship with the Radiance is adversarial, not because they compete, but because nightmare and dream energies naturally annihilate each other, like matter and antimatter. The child that results from the ritual isn't Grimm's offspring, but represents a complete reset of the nightmare consciousness to a baseline state. Those nightmare lanterns throughout Hallownest don't summon the troupe, but mark locations where dimensional barriers are naturally weak. Divine's hunger is literally infinite, because she exists partially in a void space where consumption never ends. The reason the troupe appears specifically when called involves a magical contract established by an ancient civilization that first learned to manipulate nightmare energy. Grimm's theatrical nature isn't personality, but represents the fundamental truth that nightmare energy crystallizes around dramatic narratives, and he's learned to channel this. The music that plays during his fight isn't just atmosphere, but serves as an incantation, holding his consciousness in a stable configuration. Banishing the troupe doesn't destroy them, but simply redirects their path to skip Hallownest in this dimensional cycle. Monomon's secret research. Monomon the teacher wasn't just an educator, but served as Hallownest's chief scientist, conducting research that made the Soul Sanctum's work look primitive by comparison. Her archive contains hidden research notes describing experiments with time dilation that could slow or accelerate localized temporal flow. The Umu protecting her wasn't a guard, but represents her most successful experiment in creating artificial life from pure elemental energy. Monomon's decision to become a dreamer involved secret motivations because her research revealed that the dream realm contained answers to questions about reality's fundamental structure. Those Uma jellies floating throughout the fog canyon aren't natural creatures, but escaped experiments from her laboratory. Her students weren't learning conventional subjects, but studying revolutionary theories about the relationship between mind and matter. The fog itself blanketing her archive isn't natural, but represents a failed experiment in creating a thinking gas that gained semi-sentience. Quirrell's unusual resistance to memory loss stems from specific mental conditioning techniques Monomon developed through her research. The archive's architecture contains hidden mathematical ratios in its dimensions that create a space more conducive to deep thought and research. Monomon discovered that soul energy could be encoded with information, essentially creating biological computers. Her research into memory preservation led her to realize that consciousness itself might be a form of transmissible data. Those charged lumaflies throughout the archive aren't lighting, but test subjects being used to study how energy and information intersect. Monomon's mask contained experimental enchantments that boosted her cognitive processing to superhuman levels. Her research notes reveal she discovered that the void isn't empty, but filled with a form of dark information that normal minds can't perceive. The reason she chose such an isolated location for her archive involved the danger her experiments posed to surrounding populations. Those broken tanks in the teacher's archive housed her failed attempts at creating new forms of intelligent life. Monomon's relationship with the Pale King was professional, but strained because she disagreed with his authoritarian approach to spreading higher thought. Her choice to become a dreamer wasn't sacrifice, but calculation, because she believed her consciousness could continue researching from inside the dream realm. The White Lady's dark nature. The White Lady isn't the gentle figure she appears, but represents a being of terrifying power who deliberately restrains herself through physical binding. Her roots extend throughout all of Hallownest, creating a surveillance network that lets her perceive events throughout the kingdom. The bindings she wears weren't imposed by others, but she placed them on herself because her true nature is actively dangerous to beings around her. Her relationship with the Pale King involved darker elements than suggested because ancient tablets describe her consuming other higher beings to increase her power. Those thorns throughout the Queen's gardens aren't protection, but extensions of her body that could animate and attack if she willed it. The White Lady's offspring producing abilities aren't reproductive, but represent literal creation of life, from her essence explaining the vessel's strange nature. Her dialogue about regret and guilt hints at active participation in atrocities beyond just approving the vessel plan. The reason she remains in the gardens involves self-imposed exile, because she fears what she might do if she involved herself in the kingdom's politics. Those white fragments scattered through her gardens contain trace amounts of her power that leaked out despite her bindings. The White Lady's true age predates Hallownest by thousands of years, making her potentially older than the Radiance herself. Her pale nature isn't just coloration, but represents a fundamental being of creation and growth that got twisted toward darker purposes. The covenant she mentions making with the Pale King involved terrible costs that she refuses to specify. Her knowledge of the Void's true nature suggests she may have encountered it long before coming to Hallownest. The bindings specifically suppress her ability to spread roots because if freed, she could theoretically consume all of Hallownest's life force. Her gentle demeanor is carefully maintained because her true personality before self-binding was apparently ruthless and domineering. The Pale King's attraction to her wasn't romance, but recognition that her power was necessary for his vessel plan to succeed. Those delicate flowers she tasks the knight with protecting aren't treasures, but tests to see if the vessels retained any capacity for gentleness despite their void nature. The Hive's ancient alliance. The Hive Knight and his colony weren't originally part of Hallownest, but maintained an independent kingdom that got absorbed through political manoeuvring. The honey they produce isn't just food, but contains preserved memories, explaining why consuming it provides soul. The queen they serve isn't visible in the game, but exists in a deeper chamber that got sealed off when the infection spread. Those bee warriors throughout the hive aren't infected, but following ancient protocols to defend against any intrusion. The hive's geometric architecture reflects a mathematical understanding of space that rivals the Crystal Guardian's technology. Their alliance with Hallownest involved a marriage between the Bee Queen and one of the Pale King's advisors, whose identity remains unclear. The hive's honey production served strategic purposes, providing Hallownest with a substance that could preserve things indefinitely. Those grubs found in the hive weren't captured by collectors, but represent a trading relationship between the hive and grub tribes. The infection affected the hive differently because their communal mind structure provided resistance individual bugs lacked. The Hive Knight's title isn't just rank, but represents a sacred role in bee culture as the queen's chosen champion and consort. The masks worn by hive warriors contain crystallized royal jelly that enhances their combat abilities. The hive's location in the far reaches of Kingdom's Edge wasn't random, but chosen for proximity to specific flower species the bees needed for their advanced honey production. Those platforms throughout the hive aren't architecture, but actually hardened super honey that serves as stronger building material than stone. The Bee Queen's absence from the game isn't death but transformation, because their culture involves queens entering a pupal state to achieve higher consciousness. The hive's defensive behaviour stems from protocols to protect their queen during her vulnerable transformation. Cloth's mysterious past. Cloth, the warrior, arrived in Hallownest pursuing something specific based on dialogue fragments suggesting she's hunting a creature that destroyed her home village. Her fighting style incorporates techniques from beyond Hallownest's borders, proving the existence of other developed civilizations outside the kingdom. The club she wields contains enchantments from a culture that uses different magic systems than Hallownest's soul arts. Cloth's arrival timing coincides suspiciously with the knight's return, suggesting she may have been following the vessel for reasons she never reveals. Her desire to achieve a heroic death stems from cultural beliefs in her homeland about warriors needing to die in battle to reach an afterlife. Those tattered pieces of her cloak aren't wear and tear but trophies taken from enemies she defeated during her journey to Hallownest. Cloth's knowledge of Deepnest's layout, despite being a newcomer, suggests she spent significant time exploring before the night arrives. Her encounter with Traitor Lord wasn't random, but she specifically tracked him down based on information about his fighting prowess. The sadness in her dialogue hints at survivor's guilt from failing to protect her village from whatever destroyed it. Cloth species isn't clearly identifiable, suggesting she comes from a distant region with different evolutionary pressures. Her casual mention of sailing to reach Hallownest reveals the existence of ocean travel and maritime civilizations. The specific wording of her dialogue suggests she's noble-born from her homeland, explaining her idealistic views about heroism. Cloth's decision to help the knight stems from recognition that the vessel represents her best chance at finding a worthy final battle. Her combat abilities put her on par with Hallownest's greatest warriors, despite having no connection to soul arts or void powers. The way she speaks about dreams suggests her culture has different beliefs about the dream realm than Hallownest's understanding. Tiso's failed journey. Tiso the warrior arrived in Hallownest specifically to compete in the Colosseum, having heard tales of it from travelling merchants. His shield isn't standard equipment, but a family heirloom passed down through generations of warriors in his culture. The broken bridge in Kingdom's Edge wasn't an accident, but sabotage by someone trying to prevent outsiders from reaching the Colosseum. Tiso's confidence stems from legitimate skill because his culture produces warriors who train from childhood in combat techniques. His death in the Colosseum represents the game showing that even skilled warriors from outside Hallownest can't survive its horrors without soul manipulation abilities. The way he dismisses the night suggests he can't perceive void energy and thinks the vessel is just a small weak bug. Tiso's species comes from a warm climate region, explaining his discomfort with Hallownest's cavernous environment. His goal of becoming Colosseum champion would have provided his family with enough geo to survive for generations based on cultural context clues. The specific route he takes through Hallownest suggests he had a map from previous travellers who survived the kingdom. Tiso's casual mention of other kingdoms proves Hallownest isn't unique, and multiple bug civilizations exist in the wider world. His fighting style emphasizes defense and counterattacks, suggesting his culture values patience over aggression. The merchants who told him about the Colosseum deliberately left out information about the infection because they wanted strong warriors to go die there for unknown reasons. Tiso's shield remains intact after his death, proving its exceptional quality despite him falling to brooding Molech. His absence from the Pantheon suggests his spirit didn't linger in death the way Hallownest bugs do, because his culture has different spiritual rules. Zot's delusional greatness. Zot genuinely believes his own tales of greatness because he suffers from a specific psychological condition that causes false memory formation. His weapon, Life Ender, isn't useless, but cursed to never actually harm anyone, because Zoti accidentally violated a taboo in his homeland. The precepts of Zot aren't all worthless, and some contain legitimate survival wisdom buried under his egotistical framing. His multiple rescues by the night aren't coincidence, but he's unconsciously following the vessel because he recognizes safety, even while denying he needs help. Zot's species and homeland remain deliberately ambiguous, suggesting he's lying about his origins. The Grey Prince transformation in Bretta's dreams isn't entirely her imagination, but based on Zot's true potential that his curse prevents him from accessing. His peculiar immunity to the infection stems from his mind being too fractured between fantasy and reality for the Radiance to find purchase. Zot's father, who he mentions in precepts, was genuinely a great warrior, and Zot's delusions represent him coping with impossible expectations. The reason no one takes Zot seriously involves subtle magic, making others perceive him as ridiculous, even when he occasionally does something impressive. His survival through multiple lethal encounters proves he's unconsciously extremely lucky, suggesting he might have blessing magic he doesn't know about. Zoti's relationship with Bretta reveals he's capable of genuine affection, but his psychological issues prevent him from expressing it normally. The precepts he spouts aren't all his own, but memorized from various sources, with Zot claiming them as personal wisdom. His shellwood weapon actually would be effective if he learned proper fighting technique instead of swinging it randomly. Zot's banishment from his homeland involved him accidentally insulting a sacred figure through his delusional boasting. The Colosseum's decision to let him attempt trials despite obvious incompetence suggests they enjoyed watching him fail for entertainment. Eternal Emelicia's Vigil. Emelicia guarding the Lover's Tower represents her waiting for a specific person who never returned from an expedition into Deepnest. Her dialogue about protecting the graves hints that the tower serves as a mass burial site for early Hallownest casualties. The location she guards sits positioned directly above the Collector's lair, but she doesn't know what dwells beneath. Emelicia's species suggests she's descended from an ancient warrior caste that served the kingdom before the Pale King's arrival. Her refusal to leave her post stems from a magical oath that literally binds her to the location until her beloved returns or she receives proof of death. The moss covering the tower isn't decay, but a specific plant that grows on sites of concentrated grief and loss. Emelicia's fighting abilities, if she were hostile, would be formidable, based on her equipment and stance. Her knowledge of the grubs in the tower suggests she's been feeding them to keep them alive, despite the collector's imprisonment. The reason she hasn't been infected involves the tower's location, existing in a dead zone, where the infection doesn't spread easily. Emelicia's beloved was likely one of the early expeditions into Deepnest that discovered Hera's kingdom. Her dialogue's melancholic tone reveals she knows her beloved is likely dead, but hope keeps her from accepting it. The tower served as a meeting place for lovers before the infection because its isolation provided privacy. Emelicia has been at her post for decades, based on the erosion patterns and vegetation growth around her. Her armour shows signs of maintenance, meaning she expects to one day need it for actual combat. The specific spot she guards marks a secret entrance to the tower's lower levels that was sealed after the collector's presence was discovered. The Dashmaster's philosophy. The Dashmaster in the fungal wastes represents one of the few characters who achieved enlightenment through movement rather than stillness. His teaching about flowing like water references an ancient philosophy that predates the Pale King's ascension. The location he chose for meditation sits at a convergence of wind currents, making it energetically significant. His ability to grant the dash technique proves he mastered soul manipulation through pure physical discipline without formal training. The Dashmaster's shell shows signs of incredible age, suggesting he may predate Hallownest's founding. His cryptic speech pattern mimics the rhythm of breathing during high-speed movement. The reason he gives his technique freely involves a philosophy that movement should never be hoarded. His meditation spot overlooks paths of spore travel, hinting he learned his technique from observing fungal propagation patterns. The Dashmaster's species isn't clearly identifiable, suggesting he comes from a lineage that's died out. His presence in the wastes despite the infection proves that constant movement can prevent the Radiance's influence from taking hold. The technique he teaches isn't actually about speed, but about achieving a mental state where intention and action become simultaneous. His dialogue references other movement masters throughout history who achieved similar enlightenment. The Dashmaster knows about the Moth Tribe's dream techniques and incorporates elements of them into his teaching. His decision to stay in the wastes stems from a belief that significant places of transition, like the wastes, provide better environments for teaching movement. The specific timing of his teachings being available suggests he waited for someone worthy to pass by. Millibel's perfect crime. Millibel. The banker didn't originally plan to steal depositors' money, but got desperate when the infection destroyed her previous business. Her banking operation was legitimate initially, and she provided real financial services before the kingdom collapsed. The pleasure house location she flees to wasn't random, but represents her attempting to hide in the one place no one admits to visiting. Her species is naturally gifted at mathematics and financial calculations, explaining her banking success. The amount of geo she stole represents life savings from dozens of bugs who died to the infection before they could withdraw. Millibel's guilt about the theft manifests in her dialogue's nervous patterns when discussing the bank's security. Her choice of disguise in the pleasure house is deliberately obvious, suggesting part of her wants to get caught. The specific amount of geo she stole can fund a comfortable life in regions outside Hallownest's borders. Her banking practices before turning to theft were actually helpful to the community, providing interest payments and secure storage. Millibel's backstory involves losing her own family savings to a scam artist, explaining her understanding of financial vulnerability. The way she speaks about security and trust reveals she's trying to convince herself that stealing was justified. Her species' natural greed isn't actual personality, but a survival trait from their evolutionary history. The banker's achievement in the game represents players' satisfaction at recovering stolen property through violence. Millibel's fate after being defeated remains unclear, but implications suggest she fled Hallownest entirely. Her knowledge of the city's layout proves she's been in Hallownest for years, establishing herself before the infection hit. Leg-Eater's strange wisdom. Leg-Eater's obsession with fragile charms stems from a cultural belief in his homeland that power should be temporary and earned repeatedly. His strange speech pattern isn't ignorance, but a dialect from a region where bugs communicate differently. The fragile charms he sells aren't actually fragile due to poor craftsmanship, but deliberately designed to break teaching users about impermanence. His relationship with Divine reveals he understands the troop's true nature better than he lets on. Leg-Eater's location in the fungal wastes wasn't random, but chosen for proximity to materials needed for charm crafting. His knowledge of charm construction rivals the nailsmith's expertise with weapons. The specific mushrooms growing near his home provide chemical components he uses in charm creation. Leg-Eater's resistance to the infection stems from his diet of fungal spores that alter his brain chemistry. His apparent simplicity masks a sophisticated understanding of soul energy manipulation. The reason he charges so much for repairs involves him deliberately testing whether buyers truly value the charms. Leg-Eater's backstory involves training under a master charm craftsman who died in the wastes. His relationship with Divine isn't romantic, but represents mutual respect between beings who understand transformation. The crude way he speaks about his work contradicts the precision required for successful charm creation. Leg-Eater knows about the Grim Troop's cycle from previous visits they made to Hallownest before the game's events. His charms are deliberately designed to become stronger after breaking and being repaired, representing his philosophy about growth through failure. Quirrell's lost memories. Quirrell's amnesia wasn't natural, but magically induced by Monomon to protect him from knowledge too dangerous for normal bugs to possess. His mask wasn't just protection, but contained Monomon's phylactery, binding her to life, and the dreaming seal. The journey he took before arriving in Hallownest spanned decades and multiple kingdoms. Quirrell's species is naturally long-lived, explaining his ability to survive so long outside Hallownest. His memories began returning gradually throughout his journey, back triggered by proximity to Monomon's archive. The reason Monomon sent him away involved protecting him from the infection and the sealing ritual. Quirrell's scholarly nature isn't just personality, but represents training Monomon provided in research methodology. His dialogue reveals he visited civilizations with technologies more advanced than Hallownest's soul arts. The weight of returning memories causes him visible distress throughout the game's encounters. Quirrell's decision to stay at Blue Lake after Monomon's death suggests he's contemplating suicide to join her. His fighting abilities, despite being a scholar, prove Monomon trained him in self-defense. The specific locations where Quirrell appears aren't random, but places Monomon sent him on errands in the past. His nail isn't a weapon, but a tool he adapted for defense during his long travels. Quirrell's polite demeanor masks deep sadness about outliving his teacher and purpose. The Blue Lake ending deliberately leaves his fate ambiguous, but environmental clues suggest he walked into the water. Cornifer's mapping obsession. Cornifer's drive to map everything stems from a cultural tradition where his species achieves social status through cartography. His relationship with Iselda represents a genuine partnership where she manages their business while he pursues his passion. The maps he creates aren't just practical, but contain hidden artistic elements visible only under specific lighting. Cornifer's survival in lethal environments proves he's more capable than his humble demeanor suggests. His species possesses natural navigation abilities, allowing him to mentally track complex three-dimensional spaces. The specific paper he uses for maps contains waterproofing and preservation enchantments. Cornifer's presence in dangerous areas before the night suggests he's been exploring for months or years. His humming serves as both a location beacon for players and a method he uses to maintain courage in dark areas. The maps he sells are copies, meaning he keeps master versions somewhere safe. Cornifer's knowledge of Hallownest's layout potentially exceeds even the Pale King's understanding. His encounters with dangerous creatures throughout his mapping have given him significant combat experience. The reason he never fights alongside the knight involves personal philosophy about violence even in self-defense. Cornifer's tools include specialized equipment for measuring elevation and calculating distances. His maps contain subtle markings indicating danger levels that only experienced explorers recognize. The complete map collection represents years of work and risk, making his affordable prices seem absurdly generous. Cornifer's ultimate goal involves creating a comprehensive atlas of all bug civilizations for future generations. Iselda's hidden strength. Iselda staying in Dirtmouth alone demonstrates courage most bugs in Hallownest lack. Her shop isn't just a business, but serves as a safe haven for travellers and an information hub. The pins she sells aren't mass-produced but handcrafted with care, suggesting artistic talent. Iselda's worry. Cornifer reveals their relationship's depth and her understanding of his obsessive personality. Her species excels at handicrafts and precision work, explaining the pin business. The shop's location in Dirtmouth wasn't random, but chosen for being the kingdom's safest accessible area. Iselda's knowledge of Hallownest's dangers comes from Cornifer's stories and other travellers' reports. Her dialogue evolves based on player progress, showing she pays attention to events. The shop serves as a rest point for the knight, representing one of the few consistently safe locations. Iselda's strength lies in maintaining hope and normalcy while surrounded by a dying kingdom. Her pricing for pins is deliberately affordable because she values exploration over profit. The specific pins she offers represent a curated selection based on usefulness, not just aesthetics. Iselda's dream nail dialogue reveals fears about Cornifer's safety she doesn't express openly. Her commitment to staying even as Elderbug considers leaving proves deeper bravery than most warriors display. The quill and paper she uses for record keeping come from her personal supplies since Hallownest's production infrastructure collapsed. The nailsmith's redemption. The nailsmith's suicidal request after forging the pure nail stems from his culture believing artists should die after creating their masterpiece. His entire life focused singularly on perfecting nail-smithing technique through thousands of failed attempts. The location of his shop near the city's edge wasn't choice but exile because other smiths feared his obsessive perfectionism. His collection of failed nails littering the shop represents decades of work inching toward perfection. The nailsmith's species possesses natural affinity for metalwork and temperature resistance. His knowledge of nail construction surpasses any living smith in Hallownest, making the pure nail a literally unique artifact. The specific metals he uses for the pure nail come from ancient basins' darkest depths, where special ores form under pressure. His relationship with Sheo, after sparing him, reveals his capacity for growth beyond his singular obsession. The nailsmith's technique incorporates soul manipulation to fold essence into the metal itself. His despair at achieving perfection stems from losing his life's driving purpose. The way he speaks about nails borders on romantic, suggesting he views smithing as a form of love. His final creation genuinely represents the pinnacle of physical weapon craftsmanship in Hallownest's history. The nailsmith knows techniques for working pale ore that even the Pale King's craftsman never mastered. His decision to live after being spared requires more courage than death would have. The paintings Sheo helps him create channel his perfectionism into a less self-destructive outlet. Sheo's artistic vision. Sheo the nail master abandoned combat to pursue art after witnessing the beauty in a dying enemy's final moments. His paintings, throughout his home, depict locations in Hallownest, with subtle details invisible to casual observers. The decision to leave behind his nail and students represented the hardest choice of his life. Sheo's artistic philosophy centers on capturing transient moments before they vanish forever. His teaching style emphasized finding personal truth rather than mimicking the master's technique. The specific location of his hut in Greenpath provides inspiration from the lush overgrowth and decay. Sheo's relationship with the other nail masters remains respectful despite their different life choices. His paintings contain hidden soul energy, suggesting he channels power through art as effectively as through combat. The way Sheo speaks about his brother Oro reveals concern about Oro's isolation and bitterness. His decision to take in the nailsmith represents belief in second chances and personal transformation. Sheo's combat abilities haven't diminished despite decades of not practicing. The art supplies he uses come from materials he creates himself from Greenpath's plants and minerals. His paintings of other characters show deep empathy and understanding of their inner struggles. Sheo's dream nail dialogue reveals contentment rare among Hallownest's residents. The artistic community he hoped to build never materialized because the infection killed potential students. Oro's bitter isolation. Oro the nail master retreated to the kingdom's edge after students died attempting to master his technique. His bitterness stems from guilt about pushing students too hard to match his natural talent. The location he chose for teaching requires students to prove dedication by surviving the journey. Oro's relationship with his brothers deteriorated because he viewed their choices as betrayals of their teacher's legacy. His teaching method emphasizes harsh discipline because that's how he was taught. The specific combat techniques Oro teaches focus on precision and timing over raw power. His species naturally excels at combat, giving him advantages he doesn't acknowledge when judging students. Oro's isolation has made him forget how to connect with others emotionally. The way he speaks about the Great Nail Sage reveals complicated feelings of inadequacy despite his mastery. His decision to charge for teaching stems from belief that free knowledge isn't valued. Oro's hut contains weapons from failed students he keeps as reminders of his failures. His combat abilities remain sharp through constant practice against Kingdom's Edge predators. The bitterness in his dialogue masks deep loneliness from decades without companionship. Oro's dreams reveal regret about driving away his brothers and students. His technique represents 1/3 of the Great Nail Sage's complete fighting style. Mato's gentle strength. Mato the Nail Master embodies strength through gentleness, contrasting his brother's approaches. His location in the Howling Cliffs provides solitude for meditation and practice. The technique he teaches focuses on building momentum and using enemy force against them. Mato's philosophical approach to combat emphasizes understanding over domination. His relationship with his brothers remains loving despite their disagreements about teaching methods. The specific exercises Mato uses for training develop both physical and mental discipline. His species possesses natural durability, explaining his ability to withstand punishment. Mato's choice to continue teaching despite the infection shows commitment to preserving knowledge. The way he speaks about combat reveals he views it as a conversation between fighters. His home contains training equipment designed to build strength without causing injury. Mato's combat style looks simple, but requires years of practice to master properly. His respect for the knight comes from recognizing void-enhanced potential. The loneliness of his position hasn't embittered him like it did Oro. Mato's dreams reveal satisfaction with his life choices despite sacrifices. His technique combined with his brothers would recreate the Great Nail Sage's legendary fighting style. The Great Nail Sage's legacy. The Great Nail Sage slide trained the 3 nail masters and countless other warriors before the infection. His diminutive size hides strength that surpasses nearly every fighter in Hallownest. The shop he runs in Dartmouth serves as cover for his true purpose of evaluating potential students. Sly's teaching methodology involves splitting his complete technique into 3 aspects each brother could master. His apparent senility is partially genuine and partially performance to test students' perception. The items he sells aren't random, but carefully chosen to aid exploration and combat. Sly's species possesses strength-to-size ratios that defy normal biology. His survival through Hallownest's collapse proves his combat abilities remain deadly. The way he speaks about his students reveals pride mixed with sadness about their estrangement. Sly's complete fighting technique, if demonstrated, would outclass the pure nail's capabilities. His location in Dartmouth wasn't retreat, but strategic positioning to intercept travellers. The keys he possesses suggest connections to important locations throughout the kingdom. Sly's age exceeds most bugs in Hallownest, yet his combat speed hasn't diminished. His Dreamnail dialogue reveals memory issues aren't entirely feigned. The final battle against him in Godhome proves his legendary reputation was earned. Sly's teaching created a legacy that persists even as Hallownest dies. The Godseeker's Ascension Quest. The Godseeker tribe travelled to Hallownest specifically because prophecies indicated a god would ascend there. Their methodology involves cataloguing and ranking divine beings through ritual combat. The specific god they seek isn't any existing higher being, but something that will emerge from Hallownest's death. Godseekers' appearances vary, suggesting they're a multi-species religious order rather than single race. Their presence in the junk pit wasn't accident, but punishment for a failed prophecy in another kingdom. The pantheons they construct exist partially in dream realm and partially in physical space. God-seekers' obsession with strength stems from religious doctrine that power equals divinity. Their catalogue includes gods from civilizations across the world, not just Hallownest. The specific rituals required to enter pantheons serve as tests of devotion and capability. God-seekers view void not as emptiness, but as a primordial divine force. Their presence influences the knight's potential for ascension to godhood. The language they speak contains words from dozens of dead languages. God-seekers' physical form is constrained by ceremonial wrappings that suppress their true appearance. Their dreams reveal genuine religious ecstasy when encountering powerful beings. The final pantheon represents their ultimate goal of witnessing divine birth. God-seeker tribes exist in multiple kingdoms simultaneously, pursuing parallel ascension quests. The Pale Ore's true origin. Pale ore isn't naturally occurring, but represents fragments of the Pale King's own essence, crystallized into metal. The specific locations where ore appears mark sites of his most significant magical workings. The process of forging with pale ore requires techniques the Pale King taught to select craftsmen. Each piece of ore contains trace amounts of his consciousness, explaining its enhancement properties. The ore's rarity stems from the immense power required to create it. Ancient Basins ore deposits formed when the king's early experiments with void leaked his essence. Kingdom's Edge ore appears where his influence was weakest but still present. The nailsmith's ability to work pale ore suggests the Pale King personally trained his predecessor. Weapons enhanced with pale ore gain properties that affect void and soul energy. The ore's pale coloration matches the king's own appearance, revealing the connection. Mining pale ore doesn't deplete veins because the essence slowly regenerates from ambient soul energy. The specific molecular structure of pale ore makes it ideal for conducting soul-based enchantments. Crystal Guardian's ore sample proves even mechanical beings recognize its value. The ore's interaction with the knight's nail creates resonance with its vessel nature. Future pale ore deposits may form at sites where the king's memory remains strongest. Mask shards and soul vessels. Mask shards aren't physical objects, but crystallized life force that bonds with the user's essence. The specific locations of shards mark where powerful beings died and their vitality crystallized. Each mask shard contains fragments of memories from its original source. Soul vessels similarly represent crystallized focus from deceased scholars and mages. The process of absorbing these items involves integrating foreign essence into one's own being. Mask shards choose their wielders based on spiritual compatibility. The maximum capacity for masks and vessels varies by individual based on soul strength. Ancient bugs who mastered these techniques could create shards and vessels intentionally. The knight's ability to absorb unlimited shards suggests Void's unique properties. Some shards contain more power than others, despite identical game effects. The process of finding and integrating shards represents a journey of self-improvement. Vessels found in Sanctum prove Soulmaster's researchers understood this principle. The Grub's reward of masks suggests they possess ancient knowledge about essence manipulation. Each absorbed shard slightly alters the user's spiritual composition. The theoretical maximum of masks and vessels exceeds what the game allows. Grub mimics and shapeshifters. Not all grubs encountered are genuine, and some are mimics created by the collector. The shape-shifting magic used by mimics represents ancient techniques from before Hallownest. Certain grubs possess defensive abilities that never manifest because they're constantly imprisoned. The grub species evolved in a predator-rich environment, explaining their cocoon defenses. Grubfather's transformation, after collecting all grubs, isn't death but metamorphosis into a higher form. The specific life cycle of grubs involves multiple stages players never witness. Some grubs possess intelligence rivaling bugs but lack ability to communicate. The collector's obsession with grubs stems from their species' historical importance. Grub mimics can fool even experienced collectors without close inspection. The transformation sequence suggests grubs may be juvenile forms of an unknown species. Certain predators in Hallownest specifically evolved to prey on grubs. The grub's pale coloration suggests possible connection to pale beings. Their distribution throughout the kingdom indicates they were once more numerous. Freed grubs don't actually return home, but enter hidden migration routes. The Grubfather's final form may itself be a larval stage of something larger. Whispering root secrets. Whispering roots aren't plants, but crystallized essence of dead bugs congregated into focal points. Each root's dialogue represents amalgamated voices of everyone who died nearby. The specific locations of roots mark sites of historical significance or tragedy. Dream essence harvested from roots contains fragmented memories and emotions. The root's whispers sometimes contain prophecies about future events. Their connection to the dream realm allows them to perceive things beyond normal time. Some roots possess more consciousness than others based on death toll at their location. The Pale King knew about whispering roots and used them for intelligence gathering. Roots in Greenpath whisper differently than those in Deepnest, reflecting local history. The essence they provide isn't payment but them desperately trying to remain remembered. Ancient shamans could communicate more clearly with roots extracting detailed information. The infection affects roots, causing their whispers to become more confused. Some roots contain last words of significant historical figures. The Dream Nail's interaction with roots proves their dream realm connection. Destroying roots would release trapped spirits, but also lose their accumulated knowledge. Flukenest's secrets. The Fluke Mom isn't a natural creature, but represents a failed vessel prototype that escaped containment. Her ability to spawn endless flukes stems from void exposure during creation. The location of her lair in waterways suggests aquatic adaptation experiments. Flukes themselves possess fragments of vessel properties, explaining their void coloration. The charm created from her lava channels her reproductive abilities. Flukemam's dialogue reveals unexpected intelligence and sadness about her existence. The specific environment she needs for spawning requires stagnant water rich in soul energy. Her children possess varying degrees of intelligence, with some approaching sentience. The Pale King's researchers studied her extensively before losing control of the experiment. Flukemam's true form remains hidden, as what players see is her spawning sac. The infection actually improved her spawning rate by removing mental blocks. Her species, if she has one, is unknown, suggesting unique creation. The waterway's specific design included containment measures. For her that failed, some flukes escaped into the ocean beyond Hallownest. The charm's power scaling suggests Flukemam's true strength far exceeds boss encounter difficulty. Un's mysterious nature. Un represents a higher being whose power focuses on growth and transformation rather than thought. The Lake of Un isn't water, but liquefied essence of this being's consciousness. Greenpath's unusual vitality stems directly from Un's presence and influence. The Moss Prophet serves as Un's priest, interpreting verdant growth patterns as divine messages. Un's form is distributed throughout Greenpath rather than centralized in single body. The specific evolutionary pressures in Greenpath differ from elsewhere due to Un's influence. Creatures in Greenpath show unusual adaptability, suggesting Un's transformative power. The charm-granting slug form represents minuscule fraction of Un's shape-shifting abilities. Un's relationship with the Pale King was neutral, but tense over philosophical differences. The being chooses not to grant sapience, believing instinct superior to thought. Un's power could theoretically heal the infection, but doing so would require sacrificing Greenpath. The moss creatures worship Un through action and growth rather than prayer. Ancient tablets suggest Un predates even the Radiance's influence. The lake's specific chemical composition induces transformation in those who bathe there. Un's ultimate form, if fully manifested, would be a living ecosystem. Lifeblood secrets. Lifeblood isn't natural substance, but residue from an ancient higher being's death. The creatures guarding lifeblood chambers serve as involuntary protectors bound by magic. Each lifeblood source represents a different aspect of the original being's power. The blue coloration indicates soul energy in unusually pure stable form. Lifeblood's temporary nature stems from it evaporating back into ambient soul. The specific locations of lifeblood caches mark where the being's body parts fell. Joni's blessing represents a complete conversion to lifeblood-based existence. The being that created lifeblood opposed the Pale King's philosophies. Ancient warriors used lifeblood as performance enhancers in pre-Hallownest times. The abyss consumes lifeblood differently than normal soul energy. Some bugs became addicted to lifeblood's empowering effects. The creature in the lifeblood core represents an attempt to resurrect the original being. Lifeblood's interaction with the infection provides temporary immunity. The Pale King's researchers couldn't synthesize lifeblood, despite extensive attempts. Deep focus meditation can convert soul to lifeblood, but the technique is lost. Joni's tragic story. Joni was a warrior who discovered lifeblood's power and tried to share it freely. Her blessing represents her final gift to future generations before dying. The specific cave where her blessing resides marks her actual burial site. Joni's shade never formed because lifeblood conversion prevented normal death. Her fighting style emphasized endurance and outlasting opponents through superior vitality. The society she came from worshipped the lifeblood being as a deity. Joni's mission to spread lifeblood throughout Hallownest failed when the Pale King opposed her. Her teachings about lifeblood survival persist in hidden texts throughout the kingdom. The conversion process she underwent was agonizing, but she considered it worthwhile. Joni's physical body still exists, preserved perfectly by lifeblood in her cave. her consciousness partially merged with the lifeblood being's remnant. The blessing charm channels a fragment of her warrior spirit. Joni fought against early infection outbreaks using lifeblood's protective properties. Her name became legend among those who sought alternatives to soul arts. The full extent of her lifeblood mastery exceeded any modern understanding. Salubra's collection. Salubra's charm collection represents decades of trading and scavenging throughout Hallownest. Her obsession with charms stems from childhood fascination with magical items. The specific charms she sells rotate based on what she finds in her scavenging expeditions. Salubra's species possesses natural ability to sense magical enchantments. Her shop's location in Forgotten Crossroads positioned her at Kingdom's trading hub. The blessing she gives after collecting charms represents genuine magical gift, not just discount. Salubra's knowledge of charm lore exceeds most scholars in Hallownest. Her prices reflect actual magical potency rather than arbitrary values. The pin she sells at discount helps fund her continued charm acquisition. Salubra's dream dialogue reveals loneliness from her isolated existence. Her collection includes charms whose creators are long dead. The specific display method she uses preserves charms' power over time. Salubra knows the Pale King once visited her shop incognito. Her resistance to infection stems from constant exposure to diverse charm magics. The achievement of buying everything represents supporting Hallownest's last merchant. Seer's final prophecy. The Seer's prophecies aren't predictions but memories from alternate timelines bleeding through Dream Realm. Her final vision before fading involves the knight's ultimate choice. The specific amount of essence required for rewards matches thresholds of Dream Realm power. Seer's physical form is mostly dream stuff given temporary physical presence. Her ascension after giving Dream Gate represents returning to pure dream existence. The Moth Tribe's elders could all perform similar feats before forgetting dream magic. Seer's guilt about abandoning Radiance never fully resolves before her death. The Dream Gate technique she teaches was once common knowledge among moths. Her appearance as elderly is chosen not natural, as dream beings don't age. The dialogue about ancient enemies hints at conflicts predating recorded history. Seer's awareness of the knight's true nature develops gradually through encounters. Her gift of the awoken dream nail represents trust in the knight's purpose. The specific wording of her prophecies contains hidden meanings in moth language. Seer's essence donations suggest she's giving pieces of her own being. Her final words contain a spell blessing the knight's journey. Relic Seeker. Lem's archaeological expertise makes him the most knowledgeable about Hallownest's pre-Pale King history. His shop in the city represents one man's mission to preserve cultural heritage. The relics he purchases were everyday items for ancient civilizations now extinct. Lem's species possesses natural curiosity and scholar tendencies. His frustration with the world's ignorance of history stems from witnessing knowledge loss. The specific items he values most reveal details about ancient bug societies. Lem's presence in a dying kingdom represents dedication surpassing self-preservation instinct. His dialogue reveals extensive research into the civilization that preceded Hallownest. The journal entries found suggest he's writing a comprehensive history of the ruins. Lem's collection, if preserved, would be invaluable to future civilizations. His relationship with relics borders on reverence, understanding their cultural significance. The prices he pays are generous considering the kingdom's economic collapse. Lem's knowledge could answer questions about mysteries the game never explains. His dream dialogue reveals awareness that his life's work may be forgotten. The specific location of his shop provides access to rich archaeological sites. Took's secret cards. Took's rancid egg trading represents a black market operation for items other merchants refuse. Her knowledge of obscure items suggests connections throughout Hallownest's underground economy. The specific exchange rate she offers reflects rancid eggs' actual utility in certain rituals. Took's species excels at finding value in things others consider worthless. Her shop location in the royal waterways provides discretion for questionable trades. The eggs she collects serve purposes beyond simple currency. Took's resistance to waterways hazards proves unexpected combat capability. Her dialogue hints at past as an adventurer before settling into trading. The card's achievement represents earning respect of someone who trusts no one. Took's knowledge of the infection's spread helps her predict safe trading routes. Her willingness to trade with the knight stems from recognizing void beings' usefulness. The specific eggs she acquires come from rare creatures most consider inedible. Took's business thrives while legitimate commerce collapses, showing adaptability. Her dream dialogue reveals loneliness, despite pretending preference for solitude. The egg's various uses in shadow rituals explain their persistent value. Bretta's creative mind. Bretta's rescue from fungal wastes raises questions about how she survived so long. Her immediate infatuation with the knight stems from desperation for connection. The diary entries reveal sophisticated creative writing ability. Bretta's species possesses powerful imagination that manifests in dream realm. Her relationship with Zote, despite his obvious flaws, shows her ability to see potential. The house she decorates reflects her aesthetic preferences and romantic idealism. Bretta's dreams literally create the Grey Prince battle, proving exceptional dream manipulation. Her artwork displayed shows genuine talent beyond amateur level. The specific way she idealizes her rescuers reveals deep-seated need for heroic narratives. Bretta's decision to leave at the end represents growth towards self-reliance. Her final diary entry suggests she'll become an adventurer herself. The infection never affected her because her imagination provided mental escape. Bretta's writing could preserve Hallownest's story if she survives. Her departure note to the knight shows maturation from earlier naivety. The character development across her diary represents the game's most complete growth arc. Mask Maker's philosophy. The mask maker's obsession with faces stems from belief that true self hides beneath social masks. Their creations aren't decorative, but magical items that alter wearers' identity. The specific location in Deepnest provides access to materials with transformative properties. Mask Maker's own mask is ironic statement about hiding while discussing revelation. Their species remains unclear, suggesting they wear their own creation permanently. The dialogue about shells and masks contains deeper philosophy about identity and self. Mask Maker's gift to the knight represents recognizing the vessel's unique nature. The crafting techniques they use incorporate soul manipulation and physical materials. Their presence in Deepness suggests association with the weavers, who also work with transformation. Mask Maker's workshop contains half-finished masks, suggesting ongoing experimentation. The specific masks displayed represent different aspects of identity they've studied. Their immunity to infection comes from constantly shifting identity through mask magic. The philosophical questions they pose have no answers, but prompt self-examination. Mask Maker's final mask gift serves as commentary on the knight's void nature. Their departure from Deepnest after infection suggests they're still alive somewhere. Bardoon's ancient wisdom. Bardoon represents one of the oldest living beings in Hallownest, having witnessed multiple kingdoms rise and fall. His species lives for thousands of years, accumulating vast knowledge. The specific location at Kingdom's Edge positions him between Hallownest and outside world. Bardoon's dialogue reveals he knew the Pale King personally before his rise to power. His perspective on kingdoms as temporary matches his extreme lifespan. The gift of his shell represents sharing part of himself, quite literally. Bardoon's knowledge of the worm's transformation provides crucial lore insight. His decision to remain at Kingdom's Edge, rather than enter, shows wisdom about neutrality. The way he speaks suggests he's observed dozens of civilizations. Bardoon's immunity to infection stems from his species' different mental structure. His memories stretch back before the Radiance existed in current form. The specific wording of his dialogue contains archaic terms from dead languages. Bardoon knows about the void, but chooses not to discuss it directly. His presence, throughout the world's history, makes him living historical record. The implication that more of his species exist elsewhere suggests vast unexplored world. Hornet's hybrid nature. Hornet's abilities come from a unique combination of void exposure and spider silk magic. Her needles aren't simple weapons, but weave protective threads during combat. The specific fighting style she uses incorporates both Hallownest and deepness techniques. Hornet's awareness of the night's nature develops from their first encounter. Her protection of the kingdom stems from genuine care despite her harsh demeanour. The thread she uses in combat is produced from her own body, like spiders. Hornet's voice being audible unlike other bugs suggests her hybrid nature affects her differently. Her speed surpasses most Hallownest warriors through spider genetic advantages. The specific locations where she tests the night mark important historical sites. Hornet's knowledge of the seals suggests Hera told her about the plan. Her survival skills exceed the knight's in some ways, despite less power. The name Hornet carries symbolic weight about being born to sting her father's kingdom. Her relationship with the vessels is complicated by being their sibling. Hornet's future role involves protecting whatever emerges from Hallownest's death. The sealed sibling's ending implies she understands sacrifice from watching her mother. Elderbug's persistent hope. Elderbug's decision to remain in Dartmouth exemplifies hope persisting against logic. His species typically lives longer than most, explaining his memories of better times. The specific bench he sits on marks the exact centre of Dartmouth's founding location. Elderbug's dialogue evolves based on the knight's progress, showing he pays attention. His role as greeter represents maintaining civilization's courtesies as everything collapses. The stories he tells about Dartmouth's past reveal a once thriving community. Elderbug's resistance to infection stems from his mental discipline and routine. His relationship with other Dartmouth residents shows gentle leadership. The flower quest ending, where he receives it, provides his only moment of pure joy. Elderbug's dreams reveal loneliness he never voices aloud. His persistence in maintaining the bench shows dedication to duty. The specific way he welcomes travellers maintains social bonds in isolation. Elderbug knows more about Hallownest's history than he reveals in casual conversation. His advice to the knight demonstrates wisdom earned through long life. The delicate flower's survival with him suggests he'll preserve Hallownest's memory. Eternal Emelicia's lost love. Emelicia's beloved was a warrior who descended into the Collector's lair and never returned. Her vigil lasted so long that erosion changed the landscape around her. The specific spot she guards marks where they agreed to reunite. Emelicia's armour belonged to her beloved, and she wears it in memorial. Her species forms permanent bonds, with partners explaining her inability to leave. The grubs in the tower were her beloved's discovery before the Collector imprisoned them. Emelicia's fighting stance reveals training in arts similar to the Nail Masters. Her dialogue structure suggests she speaks to her absent beloved aloud. The infection avoided her through sheer force of emotional focus. Emelicia's dreams contain only memories of her beloved's face. Her resolve strengthened rather than weakened over years of waiting. The tower served as their meeting place before expeditions. Emelicia knows her beloved is likely dead, but hope sustains her. The grave she guards is empty, waiting for confirmation of death. Her story represents love, persisting beyond reason into tragic devotion. Moss Prophet's Green Gospel. The Moss Prophet's worship of Un represents one of few religious practices untainted by the Radiance or Pale King. Their prophecies come from interpreting green path's growth patterns as divine messages. The specific mossy overgrowth on their body shows literal connection to Un's essence. Moss prophet species naturally produces moss, making them ideal for Un worship. Their location in the Queen's Station positions them at a convergence of Un's influence. The dialogue about green salvation hints at Un's potential to restore Hallownest. Moss prophet's immunity to infection comes from Un's protective influence. Their prophecies, while cryptic, have proven accurate about Greenpath's future. The staff they carry channels Un's growth magic for minor miracles. Moss prophet trains mosskin in worship practices before infection claims them. Their presence maintains Un's consciousness of events outside Greenpath. The specific rituals they perform accelerate plant growth in localized areas. Moss prophet's devotion exceeds rationality, entering sacred madness territory. Their final prophecy involves the night bringing change Un cannot prevent. The dream nail reveals their mind functions, more like plants than animals. Millibel's justifications. Millibel's theft began as temporary borrowing that spiraled beyond control. Her genuine banking skills made her early success legitimate. The specific amount stolen would fund escape to kingdoms beyond Hallownest. Millibel's species naturally hoards wealth, making her struggle with temptation biological. Her guilt manifests in increasingly nervous dialogue patterns. The pleasure house hideout was suggested by an acquaintance now dead to infection. Millibel's original plan involved returning the Geo after the infection passed. Her transformation into thief happened gradually through rationalization. The bank's security measures were real before she decided to steal. Millibel's dream dialogue reveals self-loathing beneath justifications. Her species' reputation for dishonesty made her determined to prove herself before falling to stereotype. The specific Geo amounts she accepted had thresholds where she planned to stop. Millibel knows pursuing her outside Hallownest would be impossible. Her fate, after being defeated, involves fleeing the kingdom entirely. The stolen Geo represented life savings of bugs who trusted her personally. Leg Eater and Divine's dynamic. Leg Eater's relationship with Divine goes deeper than surface interactions suggest. Their species come from neighbouring regions that historically intermarried. The way Divine treats Leg Eater shows affection expressed through teasing. Leg Eater's crude demeanour hides genuine care for Divine's well-being. Their interactions reveal a history spanning years before Hallownest. Divine's presence in Hallownest specifically followed Leg Eater's migration there. The charms Leg Eater creates are intentionally designed for Divine's transformation. Their dynamic represents an old married couple's comfortable bickering. Leg Eater's knowledge of the Grim Troop comes from Divine's explanations. Divine's consumption of charms serves purposes. Leg Eater understands, but won't explain. Their species' courtship rituals involve apparent antagonism. Leg Eater's workshop location was chosen partly for proximity to Divine's troop. Divine's affection for Leg Eater manifests in her improved charm transformations. Their relationship provides stability for both in Hallownest's chaos. The way they speak about each other when apart reveals genuine fondness. Grubfather's transformation. Grubfather's metamorphosis after collecting all grubs represents natural life cycle completion. His species' reproductive cycle involves consuming offspring to fuel transformation. The cocoon he enters will eventually produce next generation of grubs. Grubfather's guilt-laden dialogue stems from instinctual knowledge of what's coming. The transformation isn't death but ascension to reproductive adult form. His species evolved this life cycle in environments where parental protection ensures offspring survival. The specific number of grubs needed triggers hormonal changes beginning metamorphosis. Grubfather's memories will persist in transformed state, but priorities will shift. The Geo rewards represent his life savings being distributed before transformation. His species' life cycle explains their vulnerability and need for protection. The transformation takes months or years beyond the game's time frame. Grubfather's adult form would be unrecognizable to those who knew him. His final dialogue reveals awareness and acceptance of his fate. The biological imperative overrides his emotional attachment to individual grubs. His transformation ensures the species' survival beyond Hallownest's death. Grimm's true form. Grimm's physical body is a projection, and his true form exists distributed across the nightmare realm. The ritual isn't about his survival, but the nightmare heart's needs. His consciousness persists continuously through all cycles, remembering everything. The child form represents both rebirth and eternal return to the same being. Grimm's relationship with the ritual shows acceptance bordering on enthusiasm. His theatrical nature stems from Nightmare Realm's connection to dramatic archetypes. The specific wording of his dialogue contains hints about the ritual's true purpose. Grimm's power scales with how much nightmare energy he's absorbed recently. His awareness of the night's void nature makes him one of few who truly understands. The fights against him are consensual tests rather than genuine attempts to kill. Grimm's true age spans civilizations, and his memories include kingdoms before Hallownest. The music during his battle serves as focus for his consciousness. His species, if he has one, exists beyond normal biological classification. Grimm's final dialogue before banishment reveals he expected and accepts it. The Nightmare King form represents his full power, unrestrained by physical limitations. Brum's rebellion. Brum's resistance to the ritual stems from memories bleeding through from previous cycles. His species possesses unusual resistance to memory manipulation. The specific dialogue patterns reveal his growing awareness of the cycle's nature. Brum's role in the troop is essential, making his rebellion particularly difficult. His suggestion to destroy the flame represents unprecedented break in the cycle. The consequences of his choice extend beyond just this ritual. Brum's transformed state as Nim shows personality changes from severing troop connection. His accordion playing served as focus, maintaining his troop connection. The specific locations where Brum appears mark weak points in the ritual's structure. His dreams reveal guilt about abandoning the troop, despite believing it's right. Brum's knowledge of the ritual's mechanics exceeds what he should know. The flame's destruction requires specific conditions he somehow knows about. His species' natural resistance makes him ideal for breaking the cycle. Brum's fate as Nim represents freedom, but also loss of purpose. The implications of stopping the ritual involve nightmare energy build-up elsewhere. Divine's consuming nature. Divine's ability to consume charms stems from her species' unique digestive magic. The transformation she provides isn't destruction, but refinement through nightmare exposure. Her appetite is literally endless because she exists partially in Nightmare Realm's abundance. The specific charms she can consume were selected by Grimm for transformation potential. Divine species evolved as reality-adjacent beings who bridge physical and nightmare realms. Her cheerful demeanor contrasts with the horror of watching her consume items. The process she uses extracts charm's essential nature and reconstitutes it. Divine's presence in the physical world requires constant feeding to maintain. Her relationship with Leg-Eater provides anchor, keeping her partially physical. The nightmare energy she channels through consumption serves the troop's larger purpose. Divine's true form in Nightmare Realm would be incomprehensible to physical beings. Her dialogue's playful tone masks the alien nature of her existence. The specific way she describes taste refers to magical properties, not physical flavor. Divine's consumption leaves no waste because everything converts to nightmare essence. Her role in the troop is crucial for processing and redistributing nightmare energy. This comprehensive excavation of Hallownest's deepest secrets reveals a world far more complex and interconnected than surface exploration suggests, where every character carries untold histories and every location hides layered meanings waiting for dedicated seekers to uncover them, proving that Team Cherry crafted not just a game, but a genuine, archaeological site of fictional history worth studying for years to come. The Abyss's living memory. The Abyss isn't merely a pit, but possesses a form of distributed consciousness that remembers every vessel created within it. The Void's awareness operates on a level incomprehensible to beings of light and thought-making communication impossible. Those Void tendrils that grab the night during descent aren't attacks but attempts at recognition from sibling vessels. The specific depth of the Abyss corresponds to how deep the Pale King had to drill to reach primordial Void. The lighthouse structure wasn't built for navigation, but served as observation point for monitoring Void behavior. Ancient civilizations before Hallownest knew about the Void and built the original structures the Pale King later repurposed. The Void's reaction to the King's intrusion created the shade phenomenon throughout Hallownest. Those platforms descending into darkness weren't constructed normally, but represent solidified Void responding to need for passage. The Abyss remembers pain from every vessel that died in it, creating a reservoir of collective suffering. The specific temperature drop while descending reflects Void's nature as absence of heat and energy. The birthplace cutscene shows only a fraction of vessels created with thousands more implied in the background. The Void's true depth extends infinitely downward into conceptual rather than physical space. Those eggs scattered throughout represent failed early experiments before the vessel plan refined. The Abyss's Void reacts differently to the night than to other beings, recognizing it as kin. The whispers heard while descending are attempt by Void to communicate in language it doesn't understand. The seal-keeping Void contained weakens, constantly requiring the Pale King's active maintenance before his death. Shade Cloak's origin. The Shade Cloak ability comes from the night achieving perfect unity with its own shade nature. The power to pass through enemies represents becoming temporarily non-corporeal, like pure Void. Ancient Void-worshipping cults developed similar techniques before Hallownest existed. The specific location where the ability is gained marks where Void concentration is highest outside the Abyss. The cloak's shadowy appearance shows the night partially entering the space between physical and Void realms. Those brief moments of intangibility could, theoretically, be extended with perfect Void mastery. The technique requires no soul because it draws directly from the night's Void composition. Ancient texts in the Abyss describe warriors who could maintain shade form indefinitely. The ability's limitation to brief dashes stems from the night's shell constraining pure Void nature. Perfect shadow dashing creates a trail of Void particles that briefly linger in physical space. The technique's discovery by the night represents instinctive knowledge rather than learned skill. Some vessels never achieve this ability, dying before reaching sufficient Void attunement. The cloak's power could theoretically allow phasing through solid matter, not just enemies. The cooldown period represents the shell, reasserting physical coherence after Void dispersion. Ancient Shade Lord worshippers used this technique for assassination and infiltration. King's Brand. True meaning. The King's Brand isn't just a key but contains fragment of the Pale King's authority made manifest. The mark literally alters the bearer's spiritual signature to match kingdom authority. Those doors that open to the brand respond to encoded royal commands. The specific design of the brand incorporates ancient symbols predating Hallownest's founding. The Pale King created multiple brands for different purposes, with the knights being modified for vessels. The brand's power comes from layered enchantments that took years to perfect. Ancient Kingdom's Edge civilizations used similar marking systems for access control. The brand physically burns itself into the bearer's essence, not just their shell. Those White Palace areas accessible only with the brand contain the king's most private spaces. The mark identifies the bearer as having royal authority overriding most other security measures. The specific magical frequency of the brand resonates with structures infused with pale ore. Ancient tablets suggest the brand's design was stolen from the civilization that preceded Hallownest. The mark's presence alerts residual kingdom defences that the bearer is authorized. Some security systems in the palace respond only to the specific brand carried by vessels. The brand's creation required the Pale King to sacrifice portion of his own power permanently. Void Heart's unity. The Void Heart charm represents achieving perfect equilibrium between light and darkness within one being. The unification of void and shell creates a stability that neither possesses alone. Ancient prophecies described a being that would unite void and dream into singular consciousness. The charm's appearance as a cracked egg references the knight's origin and transformation. The specific moment of acquisition marks the knight transcending its original vessel purpose. The Void Heart allows containing the infection because unity of opposites can hold contradiction. Ancient void cults believed this unification would birth a new god. The charm's power eliminates the shade upon death because there's no longer internal division. The specific properties make the wearer immune to void's corrosive effects on consciousness. Ancient texts describe Void Heart bearers as neither alive nor dead, existing in a third state. The unification process fundamentally alters the bearer's existence beyond simple power gain. The charm channels both void and soul energy simultaneously, which should be impossible. Ancient kingdoms fell trying to achieve what the knight accomplishes naturally. The Void Heart's presence makes the knight capable of challenging gods successfully. The specific magical structure of the charm defies conventional enchantment principles because it bridges conceptual opposites. King Soul's tragic purpose. The King Soul charm represents the union of the Pale King and White Lady's essences crystallized. The charm was specifically designed to be given to the pure vessel as parental blessing. The two halves separated symbolize the fracture in their relationship after the vessel plan's consequences. Each half contains memories and feelings from its respective creator. The charm's soul generation represents attempt to provide vessels with sustainable energy source. Ancient binding magic used in the charm's creation required both creators' willing participation. The White Lady's half contains regret and sorrow she'll never voice. The Pale King's half contains determination mixed with growing doubt. The charm's transformation into Void Heart represents rejection of the parent's intended purpose. Ancient texts describe King Soul equivalent charms in previous kingdoms serving similar unification purposes. The charm's power scaling shows it was designed for a being without natural soul generation. The specific magical frequency resonates with vessel biology more than normal bug physiology. The charm's creation required both royals to sacrifice portions of their immortal essences. The transformation represents the knight surpassing its creator's intentions and limitations. Ancient prophecies suggested the King Soul would either save or doom Hallownest depending on its bearer's choice. Dream Nail's lost history. The Dream Nail originally served as sacred relic in Radiance worship for communicating with the goddess. The Moth tribe's metalworkers crafted it, using techniques lost when they abandoned the Radiance. The nail's power to pierce the barrier between waking and dreaming represents ancient magic. The Pale King's theft or appropriation of the nail added insult to the Moth tribe's betrayal. Ancient dream warriors used the nail to battle in the dream realm, while bodies remained safe. The specific metal composing the nail doesn't exist in physical realm, but crystallized dream essence. The nail's awakening requires essence because it feeds on dream energy to increase power. Ancient texts describe the nail choosing its wielder rather than being simply picked up. The weapon's true form in the dream realm appears vastly different than its physical manifestation. The nail's ability to read memories makes it potentially the most powerful information-gathering tool in existence. Ancient moth assassins used dream nails to kill targets by destroying their dream selves. The Pale King's modifications to the nail altered its original purpose toward kingdom service. The nail's connection to the Radiance means she's aware whenever it's used. Ancient prophecies describe the nail playing a crucial role in either the Radiance's return or final defeat. The weapon's power theoretically has no upper limit, as dream essence availability is infinite. Awoken Dream. Nail secrets. The awoken dream nail transcends its physical form, becoming a bridge between all states of consciousness. The additional power comes from the nail remembering its original purpose before corruption. Ancient dream masters could use awoken nails to physically enter the dream realm. The specific essence threshold for awakening represents the nail regaining self-awareness. The White Palace access proves the nail can pierce barriers between different reality layers. Ancient moths used awoken nails to commune directly with the Radiance before the schism. The nail's awakened state allows perceiving memories and thoughts beings try to hide. The specific magical frequency change makes it capable of affecting dream realm entities physically. Ancient texts warn that awoken nails can trap users in dream realm permanently if misused. The nail's power could theoretically alter memories, not just read them. Ancient assassins, feared by kingdoms, used awoken nails to rewrite enemy commanders' thoughts. The Pale King's modifications prevented full awakening, originally fearing what it might reveal. The nail's true awakened form would appear as pure light instead of metal. Ancient binding magic in the Pale King's modifications weakens as the nail regains essence. The weapon's ultimate potential includes creating permanent doorways between dream and waking worlds. Radiance's original nature. The Radiance wasn't always hostile, but served as a benevolent deity of light and dreams too. The Moth Tribe. Her transformation into a vengeful god stemmed from the pain of abandonment by her worshippers. Ancient tablets describe her original form as beautiful and comforting rather than terrifying. The specific nature of her power involved guiding moths through dreams toward enlightenment. The Pale King's arrival and promise of thought threatened her existence by offering alternative meaning. Ancient moth civilization reached heights under her guidance that Hallownest never achieved. Her infection isn't intentional destruction, but desperate attempt to force remembrance. The specific orange color of infection represents corrupted version of her original golden light. Ancient texts describe her realm as a place of peace before isolation drove her mad. The Radiance's true form exceeds what appears in the boss fight, showing only fraction of power. Her connection to light means she literally cannot exist if completely forgotten. Ancient binding rituals could have peacefully transitioned worship, but the moths chose abandonment. The Radiance's pain stems from being a god whose existence depends on belief watching believers leave. Her dream realm palace represents idealized memory of moth civilization's glory days. The specific way infection spreads through dreams shows her trying to reach minds directly. Ancient prophecies suggested the Radiance would either die forgotten or return to destroy those who forgot. Infection's true mechanism. The infection spreads through the dream realm rather than physical contact, making quarantine impossible. The orange substance isn't biological, but crystallized dream energy forced into waking world. Ancient research notes describe infection as the Radiance's essence bleeding into reality. The specific way it affects minds involves overwriting individual consciousness with Radiance's presence. Those glowing eyes on infected bugs represent the Radiance literally looking through them. Ancient Soul Sanctum research discovered infection exists simultaneously in multiple reality layers. The Radiance's anger and pain infuse every particle of infection with emotion. The specific symptoms progress based on the victim's resistance to dream manipulation. Ancient texts describe early infection outbreaks in kingdoms that forgot their gods. The infection's growth rate accelerated after the sealing because the Radiance's desperation increased. Those pustules and growths represent physical world rejecting dream matter, forcing it to crystallize. Ancient healers discovered infection couldn't be cured, only slowed through constant mental discipline. The Radiance's influence through infection grows stronger as more minds succumb to unified control. The specific orange hue matches the color of dreams when viewed with enhanced perception. Ancient magic users could see infection spreading through dream realm before physical symptoms appeared. The infection's ultimate goal involves forcing everyone into unified dream state under Radiance's control. Sealed vessel's tragedy. The sealed vessel wasn't actually hollow but possessed will and emotions it suppressed desperately. The specific moment it failed came when parental love for its siblings cracked its emotional restraint. Ancient vessel testing procedures missed subtle signs of developing consciousness. The pure vessel's childhood memories include training sessions and the Pale King's attention. Those cracks in its shell represent not just infection, but internal pressure from suppressed feelings. Ancient texts describe the vessel plan requiring absolute emptiness, which is philosophically impossible. The sealed vessel's dreams contained nightmares about its siblings dying in the abyss. The specific way it trembles before breaking shows awareness of its failure. Ancient binding magic used in the seal amplified any crack in emotional emptiness. The vessel's love for its father created the very weakness that doomed the plan. Those chains weren't just symbolic but magical restraints trying to contain growing consciousness. Ancient prophecies warned that even void could develop thoughts if exposed to enough will. The sealed vessel's suffering lasted years trapped with the Radiance inside its mind. The specific way infection bursts forth shows accumulated emotional pressure exploding outward. Ancient vessel candidates all developed some level of thought, but this one progressed furthest. The tragedy stems from the vessel achieving exactly what it was created to do, except for one fatal flaw: Hollow Knight's inner conflict. The Hollow Knight's battle movements show internal struggle between vessel nature and infection. The specific attacks using infected energy demonstrate the Radiance fighting through its body. Ancient combat analysis reveals the vessel sometimes deliberately it misses attacks fighting infection's control. Those moments of stillness mid-combat represent brief victories of will over infection. Ancient texts describe possession victims experiencing constant internal warfare. The Hollow Knight's suffering exceeds physical pain, including existential horror of losing self. The specific way it screams shows both vessel and Radiance expressing anguish. Ancient binding magic keeps the Hollow Knight's core consciousness somewhat separate from infection. Those infection blobs spawned during battle represent the Radiance literally birthing new infectious matter. The Hollow Knight's original fighting style before infection was likely more refined and controlled. Ancient vessel training included combat techniques visible in its uninfected movements. The specific damage threshold before infection takes over completely shows the vessel's weakening resistance. Ancient texts suggest prolonged exposure to divine consciousness erodes even void's emptiness. The Hollow Knight knows the night is its sibling, and part of it wants to lose. The final stabbing of itself represents a lucid moment, choosing death over continued suffering. YT, Palace's dream nature. The White Palace exists in a dream constructed from the Pale King's memories and guilt. The saw blades and hazards represent his internal self-punishment for his actions. Ancient dream manipulation created stable pocket dimensions like this one. The specific architecture matches the real palace, but exaggerated to nightmarish proportions. Those buzzsaws moving in impossible patterns reflect dream logic superseding physics. Ancient texts describe powerful beings creating entire realms within dreams. The palace's preservation in dreams ensures the king's legacy persists after physical death. The specific path through hazards represents the king's mental state, viewing his rule as a series of deadly choices. Ancient dream palaces served as afterlife spaces for deceased rulers. The workshop area contains memories of the king's most private experiments. Those platforms suspended in void represent his awareness of building kingdom over darkness. Ancient binding magic anchors the dream palace to physical realm through the king's soul. The specific challenge level reflects the king's perfectionist nature, even in death. Ancient texts warn dream realms can trap visitors forever if they die within. The palace's emptiness, except for hazards, shows the king's emotional isolation. The throne room at the end represents his ultimate judgment of himself. Path of Pain's meaning. The Path of Pain wasn't originally meant for outsiders, but represents the king's private meditation route. Ancient texts describe rulers using physical ordeal as spiritual practice. The specific obstacles require perfection, reflecting the king's impossible standards. Those few moments of rest between sections mirror brief respite in his duties. Ancient architecture incorporated spiritual trial paths into palace design. The exact precision required represents the king's view that anything less than perfection meant failure. The reward at the end, showing the Hollow Knight's past, reveals what the king meditated on. Ancient philosophical traditions used physical suffering to achieve mental clarity. The specific length and difficulty mirror the weight of responsibility the king carried. Those void pitfalls represent his constant awareness of failure's consequences. Ancient texts describe kings walking pain paths before making kingdom-defining decisions. The lack of checkpoints reflects the king's belief that commitment must be absolute. The specific timing windows required match the impossibly narrow margins for the vessel plan's success. Ancient meditation practices involve deliberate suffering to sharpen focus. The path's existence in dream realm means the king walked it mentally, repeatedly. The final room reveals his love for the Hollow Knight, contradicting his claims of emotional detachment. Pale King's true death. The Pale King's corpse in the palace shows he died by his own hand after the sealing failed. Ancient texts describe higher beings capable of choosing their death moment. The specific position suggests peaceful acceptance rather than sudden death. Those void tendrils near his body hint at his final experiments. Ancient suicide rituals for divine beings involved conscious dissolution of immortal essence. The timing of his death came after realizing the sealed vessel's imperfection. The specific location in his workshop shows he died working until the very end. Ancient texts describe the king foreseeing his death, but accepting it as necessary. His body's preservation suggests he put enchantments to prevent decay, even in death. The pale ore fragments nearby indicate final attempts to create something. Ancient higher beings' deaths release massive energy, explaining Hallownest's rapid decay. The specific way his body rests suggests he welcomed death as escape from guilt. Ancient texts describe him seeing the future clearly enough to know all paths led to failure. His final moments likely involved reviewing every decision, searching for where he erred. The king's death removed the central will, holding Hallownest's magical infrastructure together. Ancient prophecies suggested his death would trigger the kingdom's complete collapse. Isma's Grove Sanctuary. Isma served as the Pale King's most trusted knight before being assigned to protect the kingdom through death. Her transformation into the acidic grove represents a willing sacrifice. Ancient texts describe her love for the king being entirely selfless and pure. The specific acid in the grove matches her tears shed over the kingdom's suffering. Ancient transformation magic converted her body into the protective barrier. Her grove's location guards the path to the king's secret workshop. The acid's specific properties destroy infection, proving her protection persists beyond death. Ancient texts describe Isma knowing she would die but accepting for duty. Her tear item contains her preserved consciousness, offering blessing to worthy seekers. The specific flowers growing in her grove represent memories of happier times. Ancient magic users could transform their bodies into defensive barriers through sacrifice rituals. The grove's expansion over time shows her influence, growing even after death. Her final moments involved prayer that someone worthy would eventually reach the workshop. Ancient texts suggest Isma discovered the vessel plan's flaw, but died before warning the king. The grove's acid affects everything, except those bearing the king's mark, showing her continued loyalty. Drya's last stand. Drya fell defending the White Lady from traitor Mantis assassins during the kingdom's collapse. Her body lies in the garden's testimony to absolute loyalty unto death. Ancient texts describe her as the most skilled warrior among the 5 knights. The specific Mantis tribe that killed her later became the traitor Mantises. Ancient combat analysis suggests Drya killed dozens before being overwhelmed. Her final stand gave the White Lady time to bind herself, preventing capture. The specific wounds on her body indicate she fought until physically incapable. Ancient warrior codes demanded her level of sacrifice from sworn protectors. The White Lady's binding partly stems from guilt about Drya's death. The specific equipment Drya carried hints at her expecting betrayal. Ancient texts suggest she discovered the traitor plot moments before the attack. Her fighting style emphasized defense, reflecting her protective nature. The specific position of her body shows she died still facing the garden's entrance. Ancient funeral rites never occurred because everyone who knew her died. The hunter's journal entry about her reveals respect even from those who killed her. Ancient texts suggest Drya's spirit lingers in the garden, still attempting to guard. Zayma's forbidden. Zayma loved a bug from the beast's den, creating a scandal that divided the kingdom. Her relationship crossed species and kingdom boundaries in ways society condemned. Ancient prejudices viewed deepness bugs as lesser, making their love revolutionary. The specific delicate flower represents their secret meeting place and symbol. Ancient texts describe Zima retiring from night duties rather than end the relationship. Her lover's identity remains mysterious but was clearly important in deepness culture. The flower's fragility represents the delicate nature of their hidden relationship. Ancient social structures forbade romantic connections across kingdom divisions. Zima's accent reveals her foreign origin, making her already an outsider. The specific way she speaks about her lover shows grief transcending death. Ancient texts suggest their relationship influenced some political decisions. The grave she tends contains her lover, who died during the infection. Her survival, while her lover perished, creates eternal guilt and mourning. Ancient burial traditions she follows mix Hallownest and deepness customs. The flower quest's difficulty mirrors the challenges they faced keeping love secret. Ancient texts hint their relationship nearly prevented the war between Hallownest and Deepness. Hegemol's mysterious fate. Hegemol's armor was stolen by a maggot, leaving the knight's actual fate unknown. Ancient texts describe him as the most physically imposing of the 5 knights. The specific circumstances of the armor theft suggest he removed it willingly. Ancient theories propose he survived and lives somewhere in hiding. The false knight wearing his armor creates a legend separate from truth. Hegemol's actual abilities probably exceeded the false knight's clumsy strength. Ancient texts suggest he discovered something that made him abandon his post. The armor's enchantments remain active, even without its original wearer. Hegemol's species possessed natural strength that the armor merely enhanced. Ancient knight oaths made abandoning duty technically impossible, suggesting coercion. The specific location where armor was taken hints at Hegemon's possible destination. Ancient texts describe Hegemon questioning the vessel plan's morality. The false knight's existence means most bugs never learned the real knight disappeared. Ancient investigations into his disappearance found no body or evidence of death. The armor's weight means the maggot shows surprising strength just by wearing it. Ancient texts suggest Hegemon may have fled to Kingdom's Edge or beyond. Ogrim's unwavering loyalty. Ogrim remained loyal to Hallownest and the king even after everything fell to ruin. His species naturally produces defensive material he adapted into combat technique. Ancient texts describe him as the knight most beloved by common bugs. The specific location of his sanctuary protects a shrine to the other knights. Ancient dung beetle culture values persistence and duty above all else. His continued defense of waterways serves no practical purpose, but upholds his oath. The specific way he speaks about his fellow knights reveals deep affection. Ancient texts describe Ogrim as the emotional heart of the five knights. His fighting style emphasizes endurance and outlasting opponents. The infection somehow never touched him despite constant exposure. Ancient theories suggest his species' natural bacteria production grants infection immunity. His dreams reveal acceptance that everyone he cared about is gone. The specific dialogue about the king shows Ogrim understood his flaws, but loved him anyway. Ancient texts describe him staying at his post through the entire collapse. His simple nature masked tactical intelligence that made him effective knight. Ancient texts suggest Ogrim was the only knight the Pale King considered a true friend. Isma and Ogrim's bond. Isma and Ogrim shared a deep romantic connection neither could openly express. Ancient texts describe them exchanging gifts and letters in secret. The specific flower Ogrim requests matches Isma's favourite species. Ancient social structures made romance between knights forbidden. Their different species made the relationship even more taboo. The way Ogrim speaks about Isma reveals love he never got to fully express. Ancient texts describe Isma confiding in Ogrim about her transformation mission. His grief at her death nearly broke his oath to remain at his post. The specific way he treasures any reminder of her shows depth of feeling. Ancient texts suggest they plan to leave knighthood and live together after their service. The infection and collapse destroyed any chance of that future. Ogrim's continued service partly honours Isma's sacrifice. Ancient texts describe him visiting her grove before it became too acidic. The specific dialogue about the other knights hides his deepest grief about Isma. Ancient texts suggest they exchange vows privately, even if not officially recognised. His request for the delicate flower represents bringing Isma her favourite bloom one final time.